Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today I am joined by two wonderful ladies, Elise and Hayley. So Elise and Hayley have both been guests on the podcast previously. So if you haven't listened to their episodes, I encourage you to go back and take a listen. So one episode each separately, one for Elise and one for Hayley. And you will get an in-depth conversation and explanation of their first responder experiences and stories and all that kind of fun stuff. So thank you for joining us, ladies.
Thank you for having us again.
So today we're having a double episode with Elise and Hayley, a current detective sergeant and a former senior sergeant from state police forces in Australia. So like I said, go back and listen to their episodes if you haven't already done so. And so these ladies are the co-founders of Frontline Wellness, which incorporates their being advocates for the mental health and wellness for frontline workers and veterans, and they're both trauma-informed yoga instructors. So we're going to have a big conversation today about all things yoga and being advocates for mental health for our frontline workers and emergency services members. But yeah, ladies, thank you for joining us today. And I guess, if you wouldn't mind just giving the listeners, if they haven't already gone back and listened to your individual episodes, would you mind just giving us like a quick overview of who you are and what you're about and your first responder experience in a snapshot?
Okay. Hi.
Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go. Rock, paper, scissors.
I know, right?
I'm Hayley. I am a police veteran. I was ill health retired from state police force at the end of 2021. My time in the police force was mostly in general duties in uniform, and I spent probably the last 5 years in leadership development, which is a pretty niche and pretty cool area for a police officer. And I'm currently a yoga teacher. So from copper to yoga teacher, who would have thought?
It's a very different career trajectory. I'll give you that one.
Very different.
Hello, everyone. Elise is my name. Hayley and I have known each other for the entirety of our policing journey. My experience is much more investigator-based. I went across into the detective units pretty early on in my policing journey and my policing career, and really stayed there ever since. I had a little flirt with prosecutions for a very, very short period of time in the courts, but my passion drew me back to the investigator realm, which is where I love to be. So generally I'm passionate and focused on high victim impact crime, and I also happen to be a yoga teacher as well. So something that Hayley and I can play out together, which is a lot of fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, ladies. And I'm very excited and interested to hear about the yoga journey that you guys have, gone on together. We were discussing offline before we jump into the yoga stuff, that one thing that sort of didn't necessarily come up in our previous episodes and conversations, not to really drag it down at the very start of our conversation. I know, right? Shit. So I just wanted to ask you guys a little bit about suicide in the first responder community, and obviously in particular the policing community, which we have all either are still part of or have been a part of in our careers. And I'd, be interested to hear your thoughts about it, because something sort of that's very prevalent over here at the moment is the fact that a lot of first responders and, in particular police officers are dying by their own hands. They're, completing suicide at a rate that is, obviously any suicide is unfortunate, but, as a community, we're losing more people to suicide than we are to line of duty deaths, be that police officers, be it firefighters, be it anything like that. And I think it's, I think it's sort of probably well known that there is a mental health crisis in regards to our first responders. And I think it's why I'm here and doing this podcast and doing what I'm doing. And obviously very much why you ladies are in the realm of doing what you're doing. So I guess just, from your perspective, I'd love to hear, what your experience, potentially has been with experiencing suicides of colleagues, or even just people, in the state police force that you're aware of, and anything you'd like to share on it.
The first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is, for the longest time, I feel like it wasn't something that was present for the first, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years of my time within the police force. It was something that either, I don't want to say that it wasn't there, because that's that's not true. But to have it, to be acutely aware of it as we are now, and to openly acknowledge it, and openly bring awareness to it, I suppose. It's probably not until somebody that you've worked with or somebody that you're connected with that you lose that it really sort of starts to resonate a little bit more. And as you start to talk to people and all that sort of stuff, and as it filters through the the Blue family, or any of the first responder families and the first responder communities. But I feel like for the first half of my career, I wasn't necessarily attuned to it the way that I am now.
Yeah, I think look, it happens far too often, and I just, when you started talking about suicide, I automatically my mind went to social media, and particularly, on Facebook pages that they'll sometimes I'll open my phone and it's the thin blue line with the fallen angel on it. And you just go, and then all of the people, all of my friends are posting the same thing, and you just go, fuck, who now? And you just get that sinking feeling in your gut that you're going to know the person, or, and, it does happen far too often. And, it is often the people that we go, I'd never thought that would happen to them. I didn't know that they were struggling, or they didn't appear to be struggling. And I think I mentioned it in episode or our last chat, is that Beyond Blue, an organisation here in Australia, did the largest mental health survey of first responders, and they found a few things in that survey, and a couple of them were that a lot of people that did psychometric testing that were found to have high distress or PTSD didn't actually acknowledge that in themselves. So they weren't aware that they were struggling, or they weren't aware that they had PTSD or symptoms of. Yeah. And the other thing that was quite surprising for me, I suppose, is that we talk about how the stigma is changing, and I completely agree with that. But what this survey found was that, yes, the stigma is changing for other people. So if we look from an external point of view, and I'm saying we as a generalisation here, but individuals are happy to be supportive of a colleague that is going through mental ill health or problems or struggles. However, the self-stigma is still very much alive. So having that fear of what are people going to think of me if I'm struggling? So if you look at those two things of, one, people aren't identifying in themselves that they're struggling or what they're going through is symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and then couple that with the self-stigma around generalising the mental health conversation, supporting of other people, but then that self-stigma of what are people going to think of me if I ask for help. And I think I mentioned it in our last chat that it's really hard to ask for help. So if people are getting to the stage where they're asking for help, they're probably too far in that journey. If you get what I mean, like if someone's asking for help, they're probably at the point where they're really, really unwell.
Yeah, and that is like a really interesting point, Hayley. Just sort of the dichotomy, and I guess like the difference of being comfortable, like knowing that maybe one of your colleagues is asking for help and putting their hand up, but then being like that self-actualization of, no, I'm struggling, I need help, and then figuring out where your comfort level is in regards to that, because it might be okay with me trying to help you out, but like you're saying, like the stigma attached to yourself actually asking, it's like, and it's two very different and unique elements of the culture and of the stigma that I think, you know, a lot of people in that community can end up fighting against.
Yeah, and I think you know, the colleague that we lost earlier this year had asked for help, and the thing is, the asking for help is the start of the process, because then it's if you do receive help, it has to be individualized and right for that person. And I look at my journey, and I was very fortunate to be connected with a couple of psychologists that I immediately had a good relationship with. And you know, I was willing to do the work as well, but I would hope that if I didn't have that relationship, I would have had enough resilience or coping mechanisms in me to say, hey, this isn't working, can I try something else? So I think that that's super important too, that there's all of these little things that can go towards not going down the suicide path, I think. And you know, and that's for people that do ask for help, and there's a lot that we know that don't.
Yeah, very much so. And I think you know, especially over here in the States at the moment, like there's such a big push for, when you are a first responder and in that realm and you are reaching out and seeking help, and like you're saying, generally when you actually are at that point, like it's that kind of critical mass on the edge of the cliff, like they really fucking, if they've gotten the balls up and that confidence, and or just, you know, knowing, oh my God, I'm at that point where like, you know, it's this or bust, being in a position to speak to someone like you're talking about who is culturally competent or that you click with, because it's just can lead to such dire consequences if you finally get to that point where you get to talk to someone and then, you know, not the right person, or they don't get your job and you spend half your time explaining, you know, acronyms and bullshit to them, when you're kind of like, yeah, no, this isn't what I need right now. Like they need to be culturally competent and experienced and informed to be able to, I think, handle a lot of the things that people in the first responder and emergency services realms are gonna come to them with. Like I know I have seen, you know, a psychologist a couple of times in the past personally, and like I saw one who was awesome and I clicked with, like ideally, you know, like you did, and it was for like a personal related matter, it wasn't for a work related sense. But then for whatever reason, I had to shift, and it was kind of partway through my journey of, you know, seeing them, and then I went and saw like this other clinician who was lovely, but I just did not click with them. I'd been seeing a female and this was a male, and it didn't really have anything to do with gender, but he sat there and he had like tweed jacket on and like this little bow tie, and I was like, you know, a late 20s female. I just did not feel in any way that he understood me, and I just never went back. And I was fortunate that I was at a part of my journey in my healing where it was like, no, I'm good. Like this has shown me that I'm in a good place and I can kind of finish like the rest of this on my own. But having gone from feeling that sort of connection with a therapist or a psychologist and then completely not, the juxtaposition of it is very clear, like very clear. And I think it's very evident of how difficult it is anyway to reach out. And then when you come up against that and you're like, oh, I don't click with this person, I think it's so easy to just go, well, fuck it. Like, I tried, what am I meant to do from here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky little conundrum to, to sort of find yourself in that space where you put your hand up. I know I've sort of across the last 10 years or so reached out to maybe 4 different psychologists at different times, and it just hasn't been, it just hasn't been something that's been able to click with me, whether that's because my own barriers and my own defenses are up, regardless of whether or not, I'm saying, okay, I think I need something here.
Yeah.
But then to kind of put everything out there and, to have that connection not really present. I remember going to speak to one lady and, I was deep in burnout, which is, I think we spoke about when you and I chatted the last time, that whole sort of, opening your eyes and looking around and realizing that I've been burnt out for 6 months and, I hate myself and, I can't believe that my colleagues are tolerating me and all of that sort of stuff. And then going to try and work with that or address that and having a psychologist say, well, you're being bullied, so what of it? If you need anything else, let me know. And I was sort of like, okay, that's super unhelpful. Like, are we going to sort of work with that? Yeah. Like, no, she just told me what she determined was happening. It's like, okay, well, I think there's a few more things to unpack there, but there was no interest from her in following up or in like, okay, well, maybe next, maybe in whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and that puts so many barriers to healing, right?
100%.
Or to try and work out and to try and unpack. And
like it takes a lot, particularly in our realm and our, our professional landscape with all of the conditioning that we have, everything that we're taught, everything that we're molded into being.
Yeah.
To then get to that crossroads.
Yeah.
And to have it sort of slammed in your face a little bit. Got to, take a breath, pick yourself up.
And I mean, to have it be so unfulfilling too. Like you kind of, like you're saying, you get to that point where you're like, this is going to feel good. This is going to feel like a release. This is going to do something good for me. And then it's kind of just, you're like, ugh, like you're just left so fucking unrewarded from, like taking this risk and taking this chance to actually, try to do something about your mental health and about your burnout. Like,
where's my show bag? I want my I'm here.
I wanted my show bag.
Oh no, it's like a fucking 6-pack at night shift drink. That's all you get.
But it is an interesting place to find yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
And so what does help look like for each of us? The help, you just, the 3 of us in this room, or in this digital room, help looks completely different for each of us, or speaking out, speaking up looks different for the 3 of us in whatever place we find ourselves personally, professionally.
And that's, when it's, so an organization called the Overwatch Collective that I'm affiliated with over here, like they pay for therapy sessions and coaching sessions for first responders and military veterans. And they're trying to get a clinician in each of the 50 states over here, which is amazing. And it's all funded by donations and fundraisers and all that kind of thing. So they're doing amazing work. What I'm wondering is, are you guys aware, like, of any of the clinicians that, with the state police force that, you may engage with or get recommended to? Like, do we know if there's any vetting in regards to any of their sort of cultural understanding or competence, or does that kind of not really factor in as far as you guys are aware?
I don't know if it factors in. So the 2 psychs that I saw while I was in the police force were internal psychs. So they worked specifically in the organisation.
Okay.
But for some of them, if they just started, they don't understand the system, they don't understand the culture, they don't it takes time to get woven in, like you said, acronyms, the culture. Like, we know that every police station has a culture, and there's an organizational culture, but there's subcultures, and there's differences between it. So how can you prepare a psych for that? So it's so important for them to have the understanding, but how do you prepare them for that? So yes, there probably needs to be a vetting process, but then I go, that will just eliminate everyone. Because it's such a big thing.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like the nuances, say, between someone maybe in like a detective role going as opposed to someone who works as like a UC, like an undercover person, and then maybe someone who works in surveillance, and then you've got someone who works in traffic, or God, what else do they have? General duties. Like, there's so many different facets, and like you're saying, not only each police station, but then each sort of different division and role that you can perform within the organization also has its own little like niches and subcultures and cliques. And I mean, fuck, you're right. Like, it's, I mean, and I'm not trying to sound like like you're saying, it is a massive and a daunting challenge to kind of be culturally informed if you haven't performed the role. And I'm not expecting, complete magic from these people, but you want them to just do more harm than good, which I think is what they would personally want to do too. And it's more just like the horror stories you hear about them just being so inappropriate for that role and ending up doing more harm to the people who go to them for help. I guess that's,
I agree.
And I mean, our internal psychologists are limited, right?
Yeah.
So
I think when I was working, and like, I was also fortunate enough to be given the time during a work day to go and see a psychologist, and I think that's very unusual.
Okay.
But when I was, so this probably would have been how many years ago now? Maybe 5 or 7. There was only 12 internal psychologists for an organization of 20,000.
Yeah.
Jesus. I mean,
there's a lot of layers on that, right? Like, I was fortunate enough to have been able to feel safe enough to ask for help.
Yeah.
And then be provided time to actually go see me in work time, because I don't think I would have been able to fit it in otherwise.
Yeah.
And then to actually have a relationship, a good working relationship with the psychologists that I saw. So there's a whole lot of layers of a lot of complexity. But like you say, if people don't have that understanding or that vetting process, it just creates more barriers, because like I said, I would like to have hoped that if that relationship didn't work, I would have been resilient enough to see someone else, but I don't know if I would have been.
Yeah.
So if that was a barrier, I don't know if I would have been well enough to say, hey, this isn't working for me. Can I see someone else?
Yeah.
I just don't think I would have had that in me. And then what?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I remember when you had to change those circumstances around. Hayley had been seeing that psych, that first one, for a long time. And then she wasn't able, to continue, and the anxiety, I remember that, so even at that challenge, like, you're engaged in there, you've asked for help, but then that comfort, and that change, and, like
that stability.
Then you've got to rebuild that trust. And what, like, there's so many different facets to even when you think you've kind of landed where you need to be. Something can rock. Can unsteady.
And I don't know if you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if like you felt the same way as I did, and I think maybe it was why I sort of just was like, this all just feels like a little bit too much like hard work when it came to me seeing someone new. But like, when I first started seeing someone, I was going through a lot of hectic shit in my private life, to say the least. That's a topic for another podcast. But I don't know.
For your darkness too,
crazy ex-boyfriend podcast. I don't know. But it was the point, and obviously she was initial person I saw was like up to date with like everything that was going on as it was happening, and a lot happened in sort of like a short period of time. And it was honestly, I felt exhausted trying to have to think about going back to the start to explain everything to someone new. And I found that I just was like, and then trying to kind of remember and all the nuances and the things and the just fucking crazy bullshit that was going on, like that I found that to be like a barrier. And I guess I'm wondering, like now that like I found, now knowing that like you had to go through like a similar process, was that incredibly daunting now going, oh my God, like I now actually have to go and re-explain all of this to someone new, and just what, like they just kind of pick up, like they can't just pick up where the other person left off with you.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to the skill of the practitioner too. Because I remember going, I don't know if I can do this. Like, is this new person going to ask me about my mummy issues? Because I really don't want to go there. I don't want to start from my birth. I just want to work on, you know, my recovery and my healing. And because it was at the time, like I was seeing someone weekly and I needed that. So if that wasn't in place for me, it felt like my world was falling apart.
Yeah.
But I keep on saying I'm fortunate. But my current practitioner was able to very skillfully pick it up in a way that I didn't have to go back to the beginning. And that was probably because, they had briefings with my previous clinicians. So it's sort of, in that way, it was more seamless than starting with someone brand new.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if I would have been able to start all that process again, because I was just getting through my day was the hardest thing for me. And it's like, I can't do this shit again. Like, how many times do you have to retell a story?
Yeah.
And, particularly with me being involved in a protracted investigation, the amount of times you have to tell your story is fucking exhausting. And it was just like, I can't do this again.
Yeah.
And so my clinician was very skillful in the way that they did that. And still, like when I was ill health retired, I was very aware that my clinician was an internal police psych, and the fear and the anxiety of going, shit, am I going to have to find someone new, right? I was able to transition to their private practice, so I'm still seeing the same clinician. But again, I don't know if I would have tried to see someone new, because there was that conversation of, hey, is this going to be healthy for you to still be attached to me because I represent the organization to you?
Yeah.
But the anxiety that came even with going, I couldn't even look at trying to find another practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such like a challenging aspect of, all of the things of trying to get help. And then even once you are receiving the help that you need, and often, like you're saying, there comes into like extra hurdles and things to be dealing with. And especially even, for some people, I know of, like, vaguely remember in certain states in Australia, there's like a mental health act that your GP can assign, and I think you get like 10 free sessions a year or a 6-month period or something like that. Whereas over here, it's nothing like that. It's like guaranteed, like your healthcare is tied to your job. And then that is also part of the fear that if you go through your organization to get help, then everyone's going to know. And there's that sort of, that stigma attached, or especially being a copper, they're going to take away my gun. I'm not going to be able to do my job. There are and then, then your healthcare is tied to your job. So it's so many.
And it can be a financial barrier, like you're saying, like it, my sessions are covered by work cover. So I had an accepted work cover claim. So all of my medical expenses are paid for. But a session can cost $250. So if you look at that, even going once a month, $250 is quite a smack in the face. And the cost of living these days, who's got that in their back pocket?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to prioritize that over putting, food on the table for the kids.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's just one of those, another fun-filled element of people trying to get mental health assistance out there.
Yeah.
And I guess just to sort of, finish off, this sort of aspect of our conversation, and talking about, suicides within the police community, how, from your perspective, because I think my situation was similar, like I don't really remember hearing about anyone completing suicide when I was in my, just shy of like a decade career there. Like I don't remember hearing about a police officer completing suicide, but since I've left, it's almost kind of all I hear about. And same kind of thing, you wake up, and on Facebook it's everyone with the things, and again I have exactly that same thought, Hayley. It's like, oh my God, who now, what now, what's happened? And you just, you kind of hold your breath because you're like, oh fuck, like, it's still, even being out as long as I have been now, it still hurts your heart. And that, thin blue line family,
It rips your heart open. Like, I think because we all sit under that trauma umbrella.
yeah,
We all have that professional exposure. We all walk that professional path.
yeah,
And so when it comes to opening Facebook or Instagram or your emails, and seeing that sudden passing or seeing that thin blue line or, whatever it looks like, however it presents itself, it hurts so intuitively because you're completing suicide is completing suicide and it rips people open. But for me, there's something around, I've walked that path, or, you and I are more intimately connected than someone outside the first responder community. And I think you sort of can almost, in your body, you can almost feel or touch on, okay, I think I can see to that. I think I can see to where they may have been at that particular point in time. And I think the other thing that I found quite confronting earlier this year was, how a police funeral brings people together from across the organisation, from across the structure, the internal structure, from across office, wherever you are. Suddenly this strange feeling of reunion under such
shitty
circumstances, saying goodbye, and wondering, what happened there, but also, kind of being presented with a bizarre understanding of how they may have got to that point.
No, and I was just thinking, I'm like, I told a lie when I started at the crime department.
Oh, yes.
Someone lost, and I unfortunately never had the pleasure to meet them because it was a bit of crossover, and then they took their life sort of over like that Christmas period around the time when I started. So one of the first things I did at that office was attend that person's funeral, obviously out of like a sign of respect, even though I hadn't had the opportunity to meet them. But I just honestly, I just like remember that when we were talking. So I guess,
if I'm honest, that's the first one I remember too.
Yeah.
That was 2012.
Yeah. End of. And I guess from both of your perspectives, that was obviously one that, we're sort of like aware of, but how have you guys seen it affect the morale of, not only say like for us, like a squad or like a police station, but like the police force as a whole? Because like you were saying, I mean I was estimating there was probably like 15 to 18,000 troops, but if you're saying it's up to 20 now, which would make sense, like, from your perspective, what do you think it does to, you know, the troops when you know, that Blue Angel is popped on Facebook and the emails go out and you know, you guys start hearing about the fact that we've lost another one in that way?
I just think it feels all too real.
Mm.
And like, I remember the funeral that we attended earlier this year, I ran into one of my colleagues who was a manager of mine, and he was very prominent in my development, and I hadn't seen him in probably about 5 years, and he was very unwell. And I was shocked, and it really shook me to go, hang on a minute, you had your shit together,
Yeah.
and now you are so unbelievably unwell, and I'm not sure that he could see it.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, are you next?
Fuck.
Are you next? And I think that came with this sense of responsibility in a way. And I think that that's probably the difference that we carry, is that responsibility that not necessarily could we have done more, but it's just different. And particularly when, you know, I had a member of mine die by suicide, who I was their manager, and then it just comes with this sense of reality that and responsibility that I don't think should necessarily be there, but I think in a way we all carry it.
Yeah.
I'm probably not being too articulate, but
no, you are. I think a lot of us, you know, it's that, what did I miss? I think sometimes it kind of boils down to that. Like, it's especially when it seemingly sort of comes out of the blue. Like, you know, I can, you know, even share, like, you know, my dad wasn't a first responder, but he took his own life by suicide. And I still remember, like, my mum telling me about the last conversation that she had with him, and she said she just got this weird feeling, and she, like, he was leaving or something, and she was like, something like, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you, Dave? Or you're not going to, you know, I'm going to see you again, or something like that. And he was like, yeah, of course. And you know, he left a wife and 3 kids behind, and so do a lot of the people that, you know, we lose in you know, the policing organizations and firefighting communities and EMTs and paramedics and everything. Like, they're all leaving people behind, and the people who are left behind are always just, you know, even if they were struggling with their mental health and seemingly in a little bit of crisis or a lot of crisis, it's still so jarring, because you kind of go, like, okay, what the fuck could we have done? Like, what could we have done to stop it, to save them, to change this outcome? You know? So, and like you're saying, you know, as being a supervisor, like, you're not that person's parent, you weren't their spouse, you weren't their partner, but I think we all, because it's basic human decency. You know, you want people to live, you want them to survive, you want them to cope, you want them to adjust and get through whatever demons they're battling. And I, you know, I think suicide sometimes feels like they lost that battle.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know, isn't it, as well? Are we depowering that choice?
Yeah.
For them?
Yeah.
They obviously felt that they're not, you know, there was nothing, there was no other choice.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
But yeah, I think with sometimes I think now with, you know, even though we're talking about how opening social media and it can just be that sinking feeling when the thin blue line appears, it's a way of expression and connection that I don't think we previously had. And that awareness, you know, all of us have social media, both with first responder community and with the civilian community,
Yeah.
people that aren't first responders, and that brings awareness to them as well.
Yeah.
That those outside the first responder community, that this is a thing, this is a reality, and
that's a really good point.
Causes people to comment and reach out and, almost check in with how, if they see that thin blue line and that blue angel, causes them to just think outside for a minute or put themselves in the shoes of a first responder and, what that life must be and, what it is that we all carry.
Yeah.
Because I think just the way that our programming and conditioning is, we can very much convince. We're trained to convince, we're trained to take charge, we're trained to be fixers, and we can very much convince people that it's okay.
Yeah.
And we're okay.
Yeah.
When we carry a lot.
Yeah. And that's such a good point. Like it does open that level of awareness out from under the umbrella that I think, our organizations can kind of hide under, and you want to, dust, keep things quiet and dust it out so that, not everyone knows our dirty laundry, but it needs awareness and it needs publicity in the sense to be like, everyone's not okay.
And it needs conversations like these. It was interesting the other day, actually. I went to an internal course, but external to the office at a sort of a leadership house, I suppose you could call it.
Yep.
And there was mixed people in the room. There was mixed genders in the room. And I was really interested with how quickly people became vulnerable and how quickly people were willing to offer something of themselves.
Wow.
And how authentic people were in that space.
Yep.
Never worked together necessarily. Some of them I knew.
Yep.
But we weren't from the same offices. We weren't from the same roles.
Yep.
But we were willing to offer, these people something of ourselves. And I thought, imagine if we felt safe enough in our own offices to actually have those authentic conversations with each other.
Yeah.
And how much further along would we be if that was okay?
Yeah.
No, not worried in that space that anyone's going to take anything from me or anyone's going to tell my management, Elise is feeling this way.
Yeah.
Or, whatever that looks like. But, I was really taken with how quickly, willingly and openly people were prepared to be vulnerable in that space as opposed to in other spaces.
Yeah. No, and that...
How did you find that, Hayley, in your, when you were doing that leadership development stuff?
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point, because I think if you get people together that don't normally work together, because I've done both. So I've facilitated leadership development within groups and then with a mixed group. And working with people from the same office is really tricky, because there is that fear of, well, how is this then going to impact my life, my work life?
Yeah.
But I also don't know if it's the more senior that you get that opening up becomes more apparent. I've done some work with some of the lower ranks in the organisation, and it takes a lot more to get them to open up and to sort of give something. So I'm not sure if there's something about the higher ranks in some way, shape or form knowing that it's safe to do so. And I'm not sure that, particularly in my experience in uniform, that supervisors are skilled or talented at holding space and for allowing that to be okay for the lower ranks to sort of say, hey, I've had a shit day, or this isn't working for me, because there is that fear of they're going to take my gun away, I'll be made, I'll be on reception duties for the rest of my career. So it is, there's all of those nuances and levels.
And then, like you're saying, I think it also just does come down to, when you are like a junior burger, like you feel like you're kind of, you know, swimming amongst the sharks as it is, trying to learn the law and learn what you're meant to do. And, you know, when you get a little bit more experience and you're competing for positions and secondments. And so, yeah, showing any kind of weakness. But, and I guess, like you're saying, like, I think it's imperative for like a skilled supervisor to lead by example, to maybe go like, oh, hey, like, I saw that you went to this job. Like, I know I went to something similar when I was about your vintage, and like, you know, I found it really tough. How are you? Like, open, you know, being the person to start that conversation and generate it, to give them that grounding and that feeling like, oh, it is okay to be like, oh yeah, that kind of twisted my head a little bit, but thanks for asking, I'm okay. Or no, I'm not okay, and I don't know what to do with these thoughts and feelings and nightmares or whatever the fuck else like they're going through.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, ladies. I do appreciate it. And I know it's not the easiest topic to discuss, and especially when I know that you both lost someone that you both greatly liked and respected in the past 12 months. So thank you for sharing it. I think with, you know, what we've sort of spoken about today, and also the other episodes that you guys have had with me, I think it's incredibly evident how passionate you both feel about, you know, mental health and wellness, and that especially of, you know, policing veterans and, you know, frontline workers and people still performing in those emergency services roles. So I would love to hear about the genesis and the origins of how you guys have started your frontline wellness and yoga practices, and talk to me about how all of that started.
Would you believe us if we said it started at a winery?
Oh, look. Yes, I fucking would.
Where the best ideas begin, the sun was shining.
My main question is, where was my invite?
You're right. We need to time it for that first section of the year.
If it was during the pandemic, I was trapped over here. So you get a pass this time.
Oh, where do we begin? I mean, I'm not sure what Hayley spoke about in her conversation with you earlier. You know, certainly the way that we both came to yoga is very different. So like I, you know, sort of touched on when we last chatted was, you know, mum and dad brought yoga and Tai Chi to my sister and I when we were very young, you know, teenagers or, you know, early, you know, really, really young, teaching us just basic sort of stuff.
Yep.
Reaching in and leaning in and that sort of stuff. So it's something that was always sort of present for me in terms of practice, you know, meditation as well, and Reiki and all that sort of stuff. You know, was something that yeah, mum and dad were really into, in terms of an alternative health option and that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's floated through my journey, and I've always come back to yoga at various times and meditation at various times. But then Hayley found yoga.
I found yoga. And you know what? Like, it took a lot of people come to yoga through, I suppose, GPs or clinicians or health practitioners, just for the sheer sort of you go need to stretch sort of a thing.
Yeah.
You know, so my osteo had. She's like, no, this will be for you. You need to go to yoga. And I'm like, nah, fuck that, not doing it. No, I think
Hippie
I said
shit.
Yeah, hippie shit. No, I'm not about that. And I think I said in our last conversation, you Google yoga and it's all these very white, very thin, very flexible, very pretty women. You know, and I'm like, nah, not doing it. But I finally gave in, and I'm like, whatever, all right, let's try this. And again, you know, I think I walked into the right studio, had the right teacher and the right class, and I instantly fell in love.
Yep.
You know, it was the first time in probably 10, 15 years that I actually took a breath, that I actually slowed down that I actually allowed myself to be. You know, and that was a yin class, so, and a nidra. So yin is like you hold positions. It's basically like stretching with a nap. It's delicious.
Delicious.
And yoga nidra is a type of non-sleep deep rest.
Okay.
So
is it considered like an altered state of consciousness? Somewhat?
Sort of, yeah. It's like it's a yogic sleep.
Yeah.
There's
depends where you go within yourself.
Yeah. So they sort of say that if you do about 20 minutes of yoga nidra or non-sleep deep rest, it's about the equivalent of getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep. So when I first started my yoga practice, I was maybe getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep per night. Maybe. And the sleep that I was getting was filled with nightmares.
Yeah.
So, you know, my nervous system had been operating in a state for many, many, many years. And that was the first time that I really stopped and slowed down and felt the absence or a lessening of stress in my body. Which was amazing. And I was hooked.
Yeah.
Instantly.
It's interesting the way that you don't actually, you know, yoga's been really westernized, I suppose, and like Hayley says, it's super present on social media in that perfect pretzel posture sort of situation where you're like, unless you can bend, you know, don't even bother. And it's just not like that. Like just sitting and breathing, or sitting and, you know, just being for a moment. So we're not really, particularly as first responders, we're certainly not really encouraged to breathe or take a breath or take a break or anything like that. But I remember when Hayley was like, "Oh my God, I've been to yoga." I was like, "Oh, sweet." That is so cool.
So, Elise, were you still kind of doing it on and off? Like,
yeah, on and off.
Okay.
Not in a studio. Because I've sort of had enough, you know, over the years, I had enough awareness that I can, you know, put together something or other. You know, and I'd had, you know, the transcendental meditation training and all that sort of stuff. So, but I was very excited when Hayley said that she'd gone to yoga and she'd found this studio, and, you know, she took me along, and it's a beautiful space. It was a wonderful, you know, they've done it really, really well.
Yeah.
So the next step was like, "Ooh, hello, retreat." Hello, Vinyasa and Vino. You look like you would be perfectly paired together. And hence this is how we sort of ended up at the winery, talking about teacher training.
Wow.
Talking about what that might look like. And, you know, Hayley was sort of like, "Oh, you know, you should do that." And it was sort of, you know, it sort of got to, well, actually we both should do that. You know, and teacher training, I think initially we didn't go into it to be teachers, and we certainly didn't at that point in time have any sort of awareness around, you know, trauma aware or trauma informed and how that feeds into yoga. I've always known it does something to me, even though I've let it go and come back to it over the journey. I've always known that it resonates in some way that, you know, that builds my capacity. And so we just decided to do a 200-hour teacher training program locally.
200 hours. Wow. Okay.
That was interesting.
That was
interesting. I think I heard a little bit about that along the way.
It was an interesting space to be. And I probably, from my perspective, I say that because at that point in time, it was like 16, nearly 17 years of the world according to, you know, the organisation, and the world according to the conditioning of our profession. And, you know, I don't think I realised you don't really have any other perspective on anything else. So for me, it was about, I just need to be given something different. That is not in line with, you know, because I'm a crazy, you know, true crime reader, true crime, you know, podcast listener, like obsessive about all of the things because I love them deeply. You know, the mind of the investigator. but I just needed something else.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Hayley was.
Yeah.
What was it?
I think for me, like, yoga has really impacted my life in a really good way, and it probably holds two things. So I remember when I was working, I always used to talk to one of my mates about a hobby, right? Because I didn't have any hobbies. Yeah. And we know that the science will say that it's good to have something else to do rather than just being a copper.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah. Where do you have time for that shit?
It used to become a weekly conversation of, oh, H, you should be a DJ. Nah, fuck that. H, why don't you sing? Nah, fuck that. So, you know, there was nothing, and, you know, I found yoga as I was transitioning out of the police force. So I think I started doing yoga in like November 2021, and I was ill health retired in December 2021.
Yeah.
So for me, it played that hobby role, that
transitory days. Yeah.
Yeah, and something that I could do for myself, because I was never very good at doing things for myself, and that's probably the first time that I've actually invested in me in that sort of sense.
And you carried a lot in those months leading up to that too, with exiting, but then COVID.
Yeah. And I still don't think we've processed that, but that's probably another podcast.
I know, right?
Look, the second thing for me is really, it's been a tool in my recovery, and it's been a big part in that. So, you know, and when people think of yoga, they think of, you know, your downward dogs and all of that sort of stuff. But the breath work element, like there's 8 limbs of yoga. You know, the physical postures is just one of those. And, you know, the breath work, because as first responders, or in society at large, right? So our fight-flight response is activated these days by email notifications, by what else? TV shows, by news, by anything. So then
headlines.
You layer on top a first responder's occupation or their conditioning or their lived experiences, and we find ourselves in this heightened state of either you're on or you're collapsed and you've got nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that breath work allows you to sort of tap into that rest and digest element of our nervous system, which has been so integral to my healing and my recovery. Yeah. And so there becomes different layers on those two things. So there's a hobby side of it and there's the healing side of it. But the hobby side of it also leans into community. And for me, I know that I didn't have a hobby in the organisation, so your life becomes the organisation. Yeah. So to have a different network of people, to have a different community to be able to lean on, and to be able to also choose when you tap into that. Yeah. And I think that sort of leans into this healing element of yoga also can give you tools for your life. Yeah. Sort of a big thing has been choice. As first responders, we get choice taken away from us. We must do, we must act, we must. Yeah. We must. And I think yoga for me opened up, it's your choice. This is your choice. It is your body. It is your practice. And you get to choose. Yeah. So if you don't want to do downward dog, you don't have to do downward dog. Yeah. If you don't want to follow my guide, you don't have to follow my guide. Yeah. And I think this sort of sums it up for me. I had a lady come into my yoga class last week, and she said, I'm so glad to be here. And I said, I'm so glad you're here. And she said, I've just had surgery 9 days ago, but I needed to get out of the house, and I knew that I could come here and lay down for an hour, and that would be okay. So she laid down for an hour, and she ignored everything that I said, and she did. And that for me, it's you know, it just, yoga can give you so much more than just a pose. It can, you know, help build resilience on the mat, so then you can start practicing that off the mat. So for me, it's been very essential in me creating boundaries that I never would have. Yeah. So if I don't feel up to something, or I don't want to reply to a text message, I won't. Yeah. It's my choice. Yeah.
And that's not necessarily like, that doesn't become necessarily like a conscious thing, you know, like, oh, yoga has, do you know what I mean? Like there's not that necessarily that real overt, obvious kind of, yes, I did that, so I will do this.
Yeah.
But it just, something builds within you, you know, and something expands within you that allows you to, make, you know, feel a different vibe, make a different choice. But, you know, that said, you know, sometimes you can go to a vinyasa class or to any sort of yoga class and feel like you need to keep up and what the fuck is this shit and why am I upside down? And no, my body doesn't like that. And why? But that languaging, that invitational languaging, that choice is not present. So that is part of then how Hayley and I walked the trauma-informed and the trauma-aware path, because, you know, it was sort of this natural progression, I suppose, that, you know, yes, we've done yoga, we can teach yoga, but, you know, something about that directional, not dictating, but, you know, it was really sort of not forced, but
expected, maybe.
There's something within a lot of classes where you feel that you have to do what the teacher says, or you know, why the fuck am I here otherwise? Or, you know, a lot of people enter yoga thinking that it's exercise-based, body-based, you know, and then it's like, oh, well, there's all these other cheeky little sweeteners that are actually more delicious than, you know, than downward dog or something like that. So anyway, so then that is how we sort of looked into what it would be to be trauma-informed certified as yoga teachers. And that is much more available to a lot more people, I think, because of that choice and permission and, you know, you do you and all that sort of stuff.
And talk to me about like what's the extra components, or what, I mean, I obviously like the name being trauma informed or trauma aware, but like what specifically are they sort of teaching you in regards to the yoga practices? Is it about giving people that choice if there's something that makes them feel uncomfortable, or is, you know, I don't want to use the word trigger because it has such a connotation these days, but in terms of a trauma instance, like, is it triggering for them or bringing them back to something that is troubling them, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are very different in trauma-aware yoga as opposed to like a studio vinyasa class. And it's being aware of what trauma is and how that shows up in people's bodies. And allowing people to move at their own pace and, you know, that invitational language around cueing. It's, for me, I remember when we did our teacher training, we started with the trauma-aware class. And in yoga, you have a final rest. It's referred to as Shavasana. It's probably the most, like, everyone loves Shavasana.
Yes.
But Shavasana can also be quite challenging. So I want to sort of retract what I just said, because a lot of people find Shavasana quite difficult. I love Shavasana. I think it's amazing. But one of the things that our teacher said when he said, okay, we're going into Shavasana, please take a comfortable space or shape with your body, and I'll keep an eye on the space so you don't have to do that. And I instantly felt my whole body relax, because as first responders, what do we do?
Yeah, you're always looking at the exit. You're like being aware of your surroundings. Yep.
And he opened the class with, here's our doors. These are our entry points. You know, and just things like that you sort of go, that sort of goes to our conditioning and our lived experiences, is that, you know, I think we spoke about it. I still choose the copper seat at a cafe. I will always choose the seat with my back to the wall. So to be given permission to actually relax, and someone's doing that work for you, like, I'll keep an eye on the space. And that's really, really important. So, you know, and I'll say that every class, and I go through a bit of a spiel that can be quite repetitive, but it lets people know that there's consistency. And there's safety. And safety and comfort are the paramount parts of your practice. So I think that that's probably the major way that it is different to a general vinyasa class, and even keeping particular poses outside the realms, because for example, when we go into fight flight mode, our hip flexors shorten.
Oh, okay.
So it's then about not necessarily incorporating shapes that stretch those out, because that can be quite confronting, which can trigger a fight flight response.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way that just changing the language and changing what you offer can resonate with people in such a different way, you know, so that here are the doors, you know, you may leave at any time. It's okay to come back.
Yeah.
It's okay not to.
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden that pressure of what happens if I don't like this? What happens if I, you know, that racing mind is like, oh, it's okay if, you know, like that's just a tiny little thing, you know. And then similarly with Hayley, I felt exactly the same relief when, you know, when he said, I will, you know, I will watch over the space. And I had no concept, because I can really, you know, kind of go internal in yoga.
Yeah.
But for him to say that, and for the reaction that happened in my body, I was like, oh, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
You know, just
is. No, please go.
I was just going to say just those few words and what that does to the nervous system and what that allows your body to do and what that does to your mind.
Yeah.
And so it's those sorts, there's all of that incorporated throughout the entire practice.
Yeah. No, and I was
you do.
Yeah. I was just going to say is like, I think as well, sort of, you know, coming from a first responder realm where most of us would have like worked with a partner. So it's like, you know, that if you're like, I need to do something, like, I know that someone's got my back. I know that I can like pass that baton to someone, and like, I know that like they're going to help keep me safe and look after me. And I think even, you know, like, you know, I'm married to a first responder. So, and he's a very, masculine example of a you know, first responder, and he's a very take charge, in control kind of person. So I think, you know, I always feel very safe with him, or if we go out, and even living in this country where, you know, like going to the cinema or a concert or, you know, anything kind of can, like a shopping center can like run the risk of you know, there being like an active shooter, and you don't want to sound hyperbolic about it, but it is a reality, kind of like a lot of places you go here. And I know, like, when I'm alone with my kids, I think I do feel that level of like hypervigilance, because I'm always like, okay, where are we? Where are the exits? Like, I actually think in my head when we go to like a big shopping center, which aren't as popular as they kind of used to be here, but there's a couple in our area where I always go, okay, like, where am I going to run to? Where am I going to grab my kids and run to if there's if something goes down, if shit goes down? So I like really can think about your, you know, in that class, and you're wanting to be at peace and you know, find this really lovely place where, you know, you want to be vulnerable and just listen to it, but to still know that kind of someone's got your back in that dynamic. Like, I think there's real beauty in that, because it's really hard, even when you're not in a first responder role anymore, to relinquish that element of control and to trust someone with your safety. Like, I think that is a massive thing too, especially when your job has been sometimes to provide safety for other people, regardless of whether you're a female or not. Like, you know, you do your job, you can fucking handle yourself no matter what. So to give that over to someone else to go, okay, I need you to keep me safe, whether that's a yoga instructor, whether that's a partner or a spouse, whether it's anyone, like, it's hard to do.
Oh, yeah. But I think also, like, just allowing yourself to find safety within your own body, or to come back to your own body.
Yeah.
You know, for the most part, you know, we think that yoga is, like we sort of said, the postures or whatever else. But, you know, if you watch Hayley and I do a yoga class, or you watch Hayley and I do, you know, different postures and hold different shapes, they will be the same shape, but the way that our bodies allow us to go into them are completely different.
Yeah.
Now, sure, we look completely different, but the way that what is within, you know, from skeletons, muscles, you know, fascia, all of that sort of stuff, everything that we can't see all contributes to how we're going to hold a shape, you know, or what is going to connect with our nervous system or our bodies or whatever else. So, you know, I think we've like even just say forward fold with ragdoll or something like that. You know, there are parts of a forward fold that I like standing on my hands that I think is delicious, and I'm like, yes, I can do this all day long. You know, whereas for Hayley, that doesn't connect.
Fucking hate it. Fucking hate it. Yeah.
You know, and there are postures that I won't like. There are postures that you can feel stuck in.
Yeah.
There are shapes that your body just says no to.
Oh, see, that's so interesting because, like, I hate downward dog. I fucking hate it. And I haven't done a lot of yoga, but I hate downward dog. I'm just like, this is not comfortable. I don't feel like it's doing anything. It's hard. And maybe I'm just really uncoordinated.
Don't have to do it. You do you. You don't, you know, and so
I love
recognizing that trauma informed like offering is that.
Yeah.
Yoga is different. It's your practice. It's not our practice. It's not, you know, like you do what feels good within you. And if you don't know what feels good because you're so disconnected from your body, or you're so disconnected from, you know, your nervous system, or, you know, whatever else, well, just approach it with curiosity and go as far, or as, you know, do one pose, do more, do none.
Opt in, opt out.
Rock in 9 days post-surgery and just lie there and enjoy it.
It was so good. It was so good the way she did that. That was...
I was so happy for her. And
that was awesome.
That can be hard. And it's so hard to prioritize slowing down. And it's so hard to actually... And sometimes the hardest part is making it to the mat, because you know that hour is all about you.
Yeah.
And that can be hard.
Yeah.
And there's days, you know, and for me, my practice is so important because I know it sets me up for success for the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's become more of a hobby. It's more of a self-care must, or a self-care need, I suppose, is that I know that if I take the time to practice, then I will have a better chance of making it through the day intact and well.
Yeah.
Rather than if I don't go, shit generally gets done. So to actually take that time to come to class and lay down is fucking hard work.
Yeah.
It is hard work. So I was so super happy for her that she made that choice that prioritized herself that day.
And like you say, you know, breathing is yoga. So even though she had surgery, she was still able to, you know, connect with her breath.
Yeah.
You know, which is, like Hayley said, it's something that we're not even aware that we breathe.
Yeah.
We don't even know that we breathe. We're like, whatever. Okay, so that happens. That's cool. It's like our digestion, whatever. But yeah, like Hayley says, actually becoming aware, connecting to your breath. And we all breathe differently, right? We all, some, you know, real shallow, like depend, you know, we've got a whole system there. You know, some people, it's uncomfortable for them to breathe in deep. You know, and to breathe into their belly and all that sort of stuff. But connecting with your breath is an incredibly powerful thing that we really just don't give enough credit at all.
And it's interesting. You're not the sort of first person I've heard with like a PTSD diagnosis that has just really felt like they've been breathed back to life by yoga. I remember a few years ago I went to a firefighter PTSD conference, and one of the guest speakers was a guy by the name of James Hatch, and he's a former US Navy SEAL, and he was like severely wounded in Afghanistan. And he talks about you know, obviously he's recovery, had struggled with addiction, and got the PTSD diagnosis, and I think suffered from suicidal ideation, all that kind of thing. And he's, he's an ex-Navy SEAL. There's this certain presence about a person like that, and he get up and he talked with such love and such grace and such like adoration about the fact that he found yoga and that he felt like yoga saved his life, and he like practices it daily. And it was just really inspiring, because I was kind of like, someone like that isn't necessarily the stock standard cutout of a person who you think is going to either engage in yoga or find benefit in yoga or anything like that. But I think especially for people, struggling in certain ways with certain mental health conditions, like you're saying, it's brought you back to life and given you this amazing coping mechanism that can be exactly what you want it to be when you need it to be it, and exactly the right way for you, because you have the choice in that matter. And I think that's really beautiful.
It can be hard, it can be soft, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
It can be a mix of all of them. But I mean, even like, like we've got the first responder role, right? We're out and about and we're in amongst it and people are coming at us and, whatever else. But, I haven't been in that space for a long time. My nervous system can still be activated in the role that I do now. And, I can simply be sitting at my desk and I've realized I probably haven't taken a breath for the last, however long. I've been so focused on a task or whatever that looks like, and I'm actually holding my breath.
Yeah.
Which is not good. Do you know what I mean? And just now that, you have that awareness where you're like,
a high level of awareness of it. Yeah.
Reset, and there are different options that you can utilize to come back.
Yeah. And so I guess, as both being a current and former first responder, like, what do you think, and especially in terms of the trauma informed or even just normal yoga practice in general, what do you think that it brings to, say, someone from a first responder or emergency services or frontline worker, either past or present? Like, what can you guys speak to the benefits of someone from that realm engaging in it, and what do you think they're going to get out of it? Question without no.
Well, I think that the benefits are far and wide, but I also think, there's all of these different things that we've been speaking about, whether it's, clinical help or yoga. It's really about self-discovery and doing what's best for the person. So, you get out of your yoga practice what you want.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been the key tool to step into that rest and digest part of my nervous system. So I think for a first responder who is always told to take charge, to do, to must, to whatever, it gives people a chance to breathe. It gives people a chance to slow down.
Yeah.
It gives people a chance to take time. And, it does have the physical benefits of strengthening, of stretching, and all of that side of things as well. But for me, the regulation that yoga provides my nervous system has been the biggest benefit. In my journey. Might be different for you though.
Yeah, no, I think mine is similar. As Hayley said, in a very different way, yoga builds capacity for me too. So I get further into the day, I get further along, I can be presented with challenges, and my capacity to sidestep them or to not be pulled under by them is much greater when I am engaging in a yoga practice and when I honor my yoga practice. So, I do it because of the hours that I work. I don't have necessarily the options of attending a yoga class because I'm on the train too early and I'm home too late for the most part. But every morning I do my own yoga practice, you know, and I make certain choices about what that looks like for me, you know, to get, you know, to wake up, to activate the spine, to breathe, to meditate. And then at the end of the day, particularly on a Sunday, because Sundays are bullshit, you know, I sort of, you know, collapse into, you know, the studio, and I stretch and I do very different things that, you know, I fall asleep easier and I stay, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The morning and the night are very different postures, are very different shapes, are very different things. You know, you know, I'm using bolsters or blocks or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But they both offer me something at each end of the day.
Yeah.
That then, you know, either, gives me the capacity to move through the day or gives me the ability to disconnect from the day.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really sounds like everyone's experience or takeaways is going to be uniquely suited to them. And like you were saying, Hayley, like it's you know, what you put into it is going to affect and modify like what you get out of it, and I guess what you need out of it too.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you know, it's not like you go to a boot camp and you're told to do 20 burpees and you have to do the 20 burpees. It's like if you come to one of our classes, it's choose your own adventure. It's and that can be quite tricky, and that can take time too, right? To really tap into what you need and to ignore the cue of a teacher. Actually, I'm so proud when I look at the room and everyone's doing completely different stuff. that to me is like, yes, you're listening to your body.
Yeah.
You're listening to your needs. You're letting your needs navigate your practice.
Yeah. And that's really nice. Now I want to ask a question for both of you. Let's wind back 15, 17 years to the start of your careers. And what do you think? I know you'll be right. What do you think your mental health journey would have been like now and sort of throughout the course of your careers if something like this, like yoga, like trauma-informed yoga, had been sort of presented as an option to you from the beginning of your career in terms of like, hey, you know, day one of the academy, like this is something we offer, or this would be a really good coping mechanism and maybe something you should look into. Like, what do you think? And I know hindsight is wonderful, but with all that you know now, what do you think it would have been different like?
I think I would have had more capacity. You know, like I still struggle to get through the day. You know, that's thanks to PTSD and whatever else. So like my days are still a struggle. You know, and I look back at how far I've come. Like my nervous system used to crash at about 1:30, 2 o'clock of an afternoon. So I used to have to lay down for an hour.
Yep.
Before the school pickup and that. And I'm not necessarily having to lay down for an hour now, which is great.
Yeah.
But I just look back and I go, if I had a regulation tool, I'm not saying that I wouldn't be ill health retired, but I think that it would have given me an option for capacity.
Yep.
Whereas, you know, like I look at the capacity I had when I first started and my capacity now, and they're two completely different things. So I think that that's probably the biggest thing is that capacity for life.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's really true. I think potentially my relationship with the organisation might be very different as well. That permission piece that sits around tapping into your body and, you know, listening to your own nervous system. Like, I mean, we still don't do it well now, right? The nervous system is something that is activated in first responders, you know, between different jobs, between different shifts, between, you know.
Mine was activated as soon as the alarm went off. Like,
well, yeah, there you go.
Alarm goes off at, you know, in the morning.
And
and
like, oh, fuck. Yeah, exactly. You're like, what am I going to get today?
we talk about, we're doing a lot of awareness around talk therapy and, around reaching out and all of that sort of stuff too. But we're still not, we go to a critical incident. I went to one that I oversighted a couple of weeks ago, and, these people's nervous systems are shot to shit.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we're not offering them anything to kind of come out of that activation.
Yeah.
Yes, we're offering them support and we're driving them home and, all of that sort of stuff, but we're not actually giving people any tools to be able to self-regulate or be able to identify within themselves that something has triggered, something has activated, and now we need to, something needs to balance. It's all, it's all intellectualized or cognitized something that, you know what I mean? So I feel like back then, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I like to think I would have been open. I like to think I would have been open to that because we were so young.
I wouldn't have been. That's the other thing. I wouldn't have been. If someone told me to breathe, I'd tell them to fuck off.
Sure.
Let's take a breath, Hayley. Oh, fuck you.
Yeah. Don't tell me what to do.
But again, though, and I think it would have come into play like what the old school people said about it too. Like I think that also would have, that, when you listen to that fucking bullshit just like go to the pub and you'll be right. Like, but
it's the way you present it now. I think like, Hayley has people coming to her yoga class that, I don't know, if you had have asked them 12 months ago, maybe, do they see themselves coming weekly? I'm not sure what they would have said, but some of them aren't necessarily yogis by nature.
Yeah.
But they are absolutely finding that they're getting something out of coming to Hayley's class and being, within that, that container of safety that she can offer. So, I wonder the way that it is presented, the way that it is offered, and had that been given to us 17 years ago, maybe we would have turned our nose up at it, but it also would have sat within us as well.
Well, you know what? Christ, how much fucking drill practice did we do? I mean, like, take away a drill class and give us a yoga class. Like, they have the ability and the capacity to make us do shit in the academy, regardless of. And I mean, how often have you marched since the academy? I mean, besides retention, where we all fucked it up.
No, but because you send people off, right, at the funeral.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I was mortified that because I haven't done stuff like that. I didn't remember how to fall out, and I guess. Yeah. But you're right though, right? The organisation values that presentation.
Yeah.
And I know that we're a paramilitary organisation and it offers a sense of discipline as well, but
it values hardness.
Yes, and stoicism.
And I think yoga is about softening. Yeah. Well, it can be about softening, right? So I think I'm not sure how it would fit in the value of the organisation.
Because it could easily be mistaken as like weakness.
Yeah, or even a falling outside of the conditioning.
Yeah.
Because it's choice-based. Well, particularly what we offer is choice-based.
Yeah. No, it's just I don't know. I just
you can't know too much. Is that what I mean?
Yeah, until you get out there, you mean like
the
reason you can't be prepared enough.
I think so. Like it's one thing to know yoga. You know yoga now. I know yoga now. Or more so. We knew yoga before we did teacher training.
Yeah.
Now we know more yoga.
Yeah.
So you can't like know too much because
there's always more.
There's always more. And then as there's been more, then that allows you to find what's you in that.
Yeah.
Right? And it allows you to go, okay, well, I've got these tools. These are my favorites.
Yeah.
These are the ones I'm going to reach for.
But that's even like, we're told about like, we take communication skills when you're at the academy because you're meant to learn how to communicate with members of the public. And I don't even know at what stage we were told about welfare department or that kind of thing. But like, why can't it be expressed? Why can't it be told? Like, why can't we hit them up just with options? You never have to do it, but I don't know. I think like the education early and often is, the key, and knowledge is power. And when like we've all sat there and gone, we had no fucking idea what we're getting ourselves into. Like we all joined really young, and you think and you think you can cope, and you think that you're like, oh, I'm gonna fucking change the world, and in the end, I think more often than not we're the ones that are changed by it, as opposed to having the kind of affected or like desire and effect of what we set out for.
And I think we're still very early on in the mental health journey as a civilization. And, I think one of the positives to come out of COVID is that a lot more money, I suppose, or a lot more awareness around mental health is rising. So unfortunately it took the pandemic to bring that to light. So, if we're just getting around to this as a civilization, there's such a long way to go, particularly for emergency services personnel.
Just recognizing the seriousness of it, definitely. And what do you find, like, in terms of the dynamics in the classes? Like, do you find it's predominantly women? Are you getting like a bit of a mixture of men participating too? Like, because are you guys doing solely first responder or emergency services frontline worker classes? Like, do you have to be one of those to come into your class, or is it open to other people too?
At the moment, it's first responders, and I think that there's a sense of kinship in a way, or a sense of not immediate safety, but just a knowing that you're there with your own kind. Yeah, that sounds really bad, but you're there within. And, we have a tea and coffee after class, and a lot of people hang around for that to connect to community. Yeah. But that's a choice too. So you can choose to come in and connect with community. You can choose to come in and go straight to your mat. You can choose to stay afterwards. And there has been a great mix of people, men and women, people that are working or that are off on mental health leave or retired. So there's been sort of all sorts. Yeah,
I think that's great.
Which has been lovely to see. But I think with, we talk about the blue family in policing, it's been really quite special to see first responder community come together. That has been quite lovely to see that, we come from different walks of life, different organisations, different time in our journey, but there's still that sense of community and and yoga at the same time, which is awesome.
No, that's awesome, and it's so wonderful to be hearing about that. I guess, sorry, probably one of like the last questions I want to ask you guys is, if someone has not been sold listening to our conversation, which I do not know how they could be. But if they're sort of, questioning like you're saying, fucking hippie shit, or I don't really think yoga's for me, and I'm not twisty or bendy, or I'm a 6'4" bloke, I don't know if it's for me, like what, and I guess especially because you guys are, focusing on the trauma informed and the first responder realm, like what I guess is the main thing that you would want someone considering it to know, or even someone who's like a bit resistant to it, like what would kind of, maybe be your sales pitch to, have them maybe be open to attending a class?
I think it's really important to be curious and to approach yoga with curiosity and to set aside those preconceived beliefs or that presentation on social media or all that westernized version of what society has said yoga should be. Because it really has lost sight that yoga is for you, it's about you, and it's something that you can tap into at any point in time, wherever you are. So I just really think curiosity is probably one of the most important aspects
Mhm.
of it, well, engaging with anything, really.
I agree. One of our teachers says the more interested you become in something, the more interesting it is.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, because I was resistive to yoga. It took me a long time to get into it. But I think if you're interested, if you can approach it with open curiosity,
Mhm.
I think that's half the battle. And it's not a cult.
No.
You know, and also if you don't like it, you don't do it again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not,
Yeah.
you know,
You're not forcing people to come, but yeah.
And it's a journey. It is actually a journey of self-discovery and self-realization. And so, well, I mean, it's like anything, going to the gym. You're not going to be able to lift 120 kilos day one. If that's something that you're working towards, or that is your goal, and you're not going to be able to run 10 or 15K day one.
Yeah.
You know, everything is a journey.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just being open to something different if things that you've tried before haven't necessarily resonated the way that you had hoped they might.
Yeah.
And I also think it's quite important to find the right type of practice for people, because I know if I went to my studio and did a vinyasa class where they've got the heaters turned up to 30 on my first time, I would never go back. I would never, ever go back, because it would have been an activation of my nervous system.
Yeah.
I think that that's another important element. If you are curious, make sure that you get interested in what practice you do, and where you practice, whether it's at home. I really struggle practicing at home. It's just something that I find really hard to connect with. So I think it's like with anything that goes towards wellness, it's got to be individualized and it's got to suit the person, and that can look completely different for each and every one of us. So I think finding the right practice that will support your safety and your comfort is probably paramount.
And it goes right back to where we started, right? Reaching out, finding a clinician, finding a practitioner that you engage with, that you connect with. I know, you know, there are some even within the studio that Hayley and I practice at. Some of the teachers, if we had have had them potentially, or if a person had them day one, you know, you wouldn't necessarily come back. And that has nothing to do with the practice of yoga itself. But that is necessary. That is, you know, part of the skill of the, you know, of the practitioner, or the skill of the teacher, and, you know, what they offer, and therefore what you connect with, much like we've talked about finding the way through, you know, talk therapy to get to that connection point that you need with anything.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I think it goes right back to where we began.
Absolutely.
And it kind of also sounds like if you are a first responder, emergency services worker, you know, police veteran, or anyone in like that frontline sense, like, and maybe you feel like something is off inside you and you're looking for an opportunity to do some healing, but the things that you've tried maybe haven't worked as yet, that what have you got to lose? Like how long is a yoga session? Like 45 minutes, an hour, half an hour?
You can find an online 5-minute yoga class.
So,
there's so many different modalities. You know, if you're curious about the non-sleep deep rest, there's so many apps and recordings that you can try. There's plenty of different modalities out there.
And start with where you're at. Don't go to an hour and a half yoga class, vinyasa in your head.
Yoga.
Like that's not gonna help a lot of people. But if you've got 3 or 5 minutes, that's where you start with anything. Maybe you build from there. Maybe you stay there for a little while. You know, it's all okay. It's all for you. So you know.
No, I love that. That was a brilliant explanation. So thank you, ladies. I really appreciate it. My final question that I want to throw at you Well, I was going to say this evening, but it's your morning, so. So normally I finish our I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness podcast episodes with asking our guests a question about what they do to hold space for their own darkness and what people can do to help them. And when we talk about darkness, it's about the element of darkness that can permeate the first responder realm that we've, all been involved in or are still currently in. But so because these lovely ladies have already answered those questions on their previous episodes, I thought that I would put a slight twist on it for them and just ask both Elise and Hayley what they think, or what's the best thing that they can think of that they would want to do to someone to hold space for their darkness if given the opportunity.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is simply showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to offer a container, to be able to offer space, to be able to offer a sense of safety for another person.
Yep.
Showing up is the most important thing for me, I think, because that's where all connection begins.
I love that.
I think for me, I'm quite similar. I think holding space is really important. And, knowing that a conversation is able to happen and knowing that I don't have to fix that person and what they say has nothing to do with me.
Yep.
Because I think we get so caught up on shit. If I ask someone if they're all right, what is that going to take of me to help them or to fix them or to whatever? So I think in society we've become it's people are so hesitant to say how are you, how you going, how you doing, and I think just being able to hold that space to know that if you connect and if you want to talk, that's cool, let's do that. And if you don't, that's also cool too. But I'm not going to try and fix you.
Yep.
I'm here to support you in any way, shape, whatever. But I'm not going to tell you what you need because you are your greatest teacher. And you do you.
Yep. No, I love that. Both of those answers were superb. Thank you so much, ladies. And just a subtle little twist on it that I thought you wouldn't mind. So talk to me briefly before we go about, so you guys have an Instagram page. I want to say Frontline Wellness, but the actual name of it, or the what would you call it? Handle. Thank you. It's Frontline_Wellness_AUS for Australia. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
And talk to us, what do you guys post on there?
We sort of post wherever we feel we are at any given point in time, or, so we post about yoga.
Yeah.
I mean,
shockingly.
And we post about the first responder community, and we post about, Hayley referenced those statistics, early on, and, we post about, we offer different perspectives, what our journey has meant for us, or what might resonate with the first responder community. It's different offerings depending on, Hayley offers different themes every week in her yoga class, and sometimes we'll, offer a version of what that theming might be. Little takeaways for people to, tap into if that's what they'd like to do.
And I think it's also about maybe highlighting or understanding that the first responder community is different. We see shit that people shouldn't see
and won't see
and
don't know
exist. I think, and I a lot of mental health advocate programs or initiatives or whatever are about, I suppose, civilians.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I am one now, but you know, so I think that highlighting how we're different is also helpful.
Yeah. Normalizing our professional experience and our professional conditioning and our lived experience is valid.
Yeah.
And normalizing that exposure, ongoing and protracted exposure to abnormal situations.
Yeah.
And the reactions that our physiology can have to what we see is actually completely normal, because we're human. Hello, hashtag first responders are just human too. Do you know what I mean? So, but we forget. We forget ourselves.
Yeah.
We actually forget that it's okay for us to be human.
Yeah. No, and I completely resonate with that, because I think we're all coming at it from the same direction, but just in different ways. Like, that's the whole point of this podcast is, you know, I was a first responder. I'm married to a first responder. So there are things that I know and that he knows, and there are differences in our relationship as a result of what we do and what he does and what I've done and all that kind of thing, and the way that we view the world and the things that we've seen and how we choose to cope with them. And while I'm, you know, throwing this out there for anyone who wants to watch or listen, and you know, what I offer, like with my coaching services, like, yeah, you guys are just coming at it from a slightly different perspective in terms of wanting to offer that, you know, those skills and that lovely space of, like, you know, the yoga studio and the yoga practices for people that, I think, like we were saying, like, you feel a special kinship with people who, when you know that they've done a similar role, and it's a bond, and you don't have to know them personally, but it's like, you know, you go to a barbecue, who do you gravitate towards? It's always the coppers or the fireys or the this or the that. Like, it's
how often do you go into, like, somewhere where you've never been before, and you go, that bloke there is a copper. He's got to be a fiery. She has to be a fiery. You know, like, it's the unspoken thing where you just sort of end up next to them. It's really
an
weird
energy or something.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's like you say, you and your hubby, you know, you guys are both come at the same thing from different perspectives. It's the same as Hayley and I as well. You know, like, yes, we've worked for the same organization. We work together. You know, that's how we met for a long time. But if you were to critically examine our professional journeys and where we've landed, you know, all these years later, they're very, very different.
Yeah.
But that doesn't interfere with the way that we show up for each other, or the way that we communicate with each other, or the way that now, you know, we have frontline wellness, and, you know, the way that we're yoga teachers, and, you know, what we can offer. You know, we sort of have, in a way, we've got every sort of aspect, you know, between the two of us.
Yeah.
From our own lived experience.
Yeah, and it does, and it massively makes sense. Like, you know, we caught out with some of, like, my hubby's friends a couple of weekends ago that he went to college with, like, 30 years ago. And yes, my husband's old. But, you know, and one of his mates.
We're aging too, my darling. We are aging too.
Yeah, but I would never be older than him. And so I'm very happy. I always lord that over him.
And there's some comfort in that.
It really is. It really is. But yeah, so, and one of his mates was a copper over here he like just retired in the last 12 months. And I don't know what it is. Like, him and I always gravitate towards each other, or if we're at like a work function for, you know, my husband with like firefighters, like I always end up talking to the firefighter men as opposed to like the wives. And I talk to the wives, and it's not the fact that I don't, but you always, I feel like, gravitate towards those people that you feel that innate like connection with. And I just, I don't think you ever lose that, you know? And I know, like, and you guys would have heard it so many times, you know, when we were in the job, it's like nothing more X than a fucking ex-copper. But I actually disagree with that. I now that I am one, like, I still feel incredibly bonded and connected to those people in that community. And, you know, look at you and me, Elise, like, I moved, you know, halfway over the other side of the world. And if anything, like, our friendship has probably become like stronger and better in that time.
Yeah,
So.
I absolutely agree. And I think you and I spoke about this the last time, you know, where do you invest?
Yeah.
You know, where do you choose to put in your time?
Yeah.
You know, it's the same with Hayley and I. We could have very easily had a surface level friendship that didn't go beyond the organization.
Yeah.
But we didn't. You know, here we are. You know, and I think, yeah, it's hard work, right? Like, it's work.
Yeah.
Friendship.
Of course.
Connection and all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, it's worth the investment because of where that journey takes you.
Yeah.
You know, and I absolutely, you know, Hayley and I will be friends forever, regardless of what organization, where we work. You know, you and I will know each other forever. You're coming home soon and I'm just cannot wait. You know, like all of that sort of stuff. We see each other, you know, all the time.
Exactly.
Like, you know, where do you choose to invest your time and invest your energy? And wherever that is, that's where the reward is.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Where the next journey.
And may I say, when I come home next February, I want all three of us to invest our time in a fucking winery together.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
solve the world's problems.
We might solve them at several wineries. Oh, where do we begin?
Well, I look forward.
Who knows what idea will be born?
I know, right?
Who knows?
That will be.
We'll get you and yoga teaching too, probably.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. You know, I'm much more of an angry, aggressive exerciser, right? You know that.
I do know that. We show up very differently.
Exactly. But I'm happy to come and participate for at least one. I'll give it a crack, ladies. You know,
maybe that's what we need. We'll put you on the podcast. I'm putting you through through a trauma-aware yoga class.
I don't think anyone listening wants to hear me moan and fucking groan.
You don't know that.
I don't know. I might have to set up like an OnlyFans account for that one, but we'll see.
The people want what the people want, you know. I mean,
hey, if it makes money, my husband would be all for it. I feel like as long as I get a third, I'm happy, babe.
No.
But so yes, anyone who is on Instagram, please jump on and follow these lovely ladies. They're sharing their wonderful yoga practices, some beautiful inspirational quotes, and general mental health, wellness, and advocacy for the first responder population. So it is, remind me again, frontline_wellness_AUS. And I may or may not have heard a rumor that a website is in the works.
Yes, that's in the works. So hopefully that'll be up and running very, very shortly.
Yeah. And would there be any talk of, you know, and this is definitely a question without notice, so I apologize, it just popped into my head. You know, looking at, because obviously what you do is I would think considered like quite niche in terms of trauma-informed yoga for first responders. Would you guys look at maybe like YouTube channel to like be posting videos of practices that to, you know, like, and even like you're talking about the variations of being able to do like a 5-minute one, a 10-minute one, to give people those beautiful introductory spaces to maybe see what it is before they take a deep dive in?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be on the way shortly. And also probably some recordings on Insight Timer maybe. Lots to explore there.
There is lots.
Okay.
Lots to offer.
All right.
Lots to offer. And yeah, people come into things, go into things, different angles, different depths, different, you know. We'll have lots to offer.
Yeah, well, maybe we can do an update episode when I come back and visit in February, maybe at the winery.
At a winery?
Yes, definitely.
we can see where you guys are at with it all, and let our listeners know and share all the wonderful details with them.
Sounds amazing.
All right, fantastic. Yes. All right, Hayley and Elise, thank you so much for your time today/tonight. I greatly appreciate it. All right, this has been
always a pleasure.
Thank you, darling. This has been I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard.